Hello everyone, I'm Ben Johnson and this is the Perpetual Chess Podcast. On Perpetual Chess, I have weekly conversations with chess players, personalities, authors, and adult improvers about their lives, their careers, and about chess improvement. Perpetual Chess is brought to you through the generosity of its Patreon and PayPal supporters. For more information, go to perpetualchesspod.com. Hello again everyone, welcome back to Perpetual Chess. Before we bring in today's guest, who is raring to go, we've already been chatting. I did just want to do a quick programming note. So as you guys listen, about 10 days prior, we introduced a new podcast that I'm going to be doing once a month called Perpetual Chess, Books Recaptured. The first one was on November 15th. Hopefully a lot of you heard it. The first one was with Sam Copeland of chess.com talking about the life and games of Mikhail Tal. I'm happy to report that everyone who's reached out to me has really enjoyed it. So it's definitely all systems go with this new monthly podcast. I just wanted to clarify a couple things that might not have been clear on the first podcast, which is that one's going to stay on this feed for the foreseeable future. So you don't have to subscribe to another podcast. It'll come in once a month. It's going to be released on the third Friday of each month. So look for the next one on December 16th. I'm currently brainstorming what we're going to do next and with whom, but I'm happy to report I've got some volunteers lined up, so it should be fun. And the other thing was I did need to issue a retraction from Sam and I's conversation about the life and games of Mikhail Tal. So we had mentioned that Yakov Domsky, the esteemed chess journalist, was a co-author of the life and games of Tal. And upon further digging, there's no real evidence of that. It says it some places on the internet, but his name is not in the book, and his name is listed as a co-author of a few other books with Mikhail Tal. So I think we made a mistake there, and I apologize for that. I don't think it changes much of the substance of the conversation, but I did want to fall on my sword there. So sorry about that, guys. But with that out of the way, let's get to this week's episode. So I'm excited for a return guest, someone who was back in the early days of Perpetual Chess, came on, and I was excited then, and I'm excited now. He got his start as a chess YouTuber. He, of course, is a strong chess player, international master, a teacher, but these days he's become best known as a chess author. His book, Keep It Simple 1E4, was the 2018 Chess Pub Book of the Year, and he's written 8 courses for Chessable, including hot off the presses, Fight Like Magnus, the Sicilian, which I have checked out and greatly enjoyed. It's really an impressive work. So without further ado, I would like to reintroduce friend of the show. I am Christof Sielecki. Christof, how are you?
Yeah, I'm fine, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, and as I've mentioned, been checking out this book. I was really impressed with the push that Chessable put behind it and the depth of the course. And it's really a pleasure to read, and I'm into the opening. I mean, the Sveshnikov Sicilian suits my style, and of course it piqued my interest seeing Magnus trot it out there against Caruana. So I was really happy when I heard that you were going to do this. So when did you make the decision that this was going to be your next Chessable course?
I think we decided that I should do this in July or August. It's not so long ago, because I was writing Keep It Simple D4. That was the one before. And that was released in June. And we didn't plan beforehand because after you have completed a course and it is released, you really need like a couple of weeks off. Yeah, it's there's so much stress involved. Yeah, right before the release, it's probably difficult to imagine if you're not doing it yourself. And after that, you just need a bit of vacation. And like in July, there were 2 or 3 options what I could do. And then I don't even know who came up with the idea. There was the idea to do this Sicilian course based on Magnus's opening choices. It is a complete Sicilian, not just the Sveshnikov. That is, of course, the core. With every Sicilian course, you need to have something in the open Sicilian. But it also has all the sidelines down to the real rare moves on move 2 and the gambits, whatever white can play, which is almost never played on the highest level. So for the rare lines, you oftentimes don't have a single game. Magnus has never played, let's say, against the wing Gambit in the Sicilian. Right. Nobody tried that. There's actually one line in the wing Gambit that is not so terrible for white, funny enough, but it still was never played against him. And for those lines, of course, I had to research my own suggestions. I couldn't rely on Magnus's games. For all the other main choices, I just checked what does Magnus play and took that as the blueprint, so to say. In some cases, I deviate, but only relatively late in the game. Let's say there are cases on move 14, move 15, when there was just one single game that he has played. And there were cases where he chose a continuation that was very solid and certainly theoretically sound, but it would just be a draw, or it would be a situation where maybe the winning chances would be relatively slim. And if the alternative seemed completely sound to me and exciting, then I went for this one, because it's called fight and not like draw.
Right.
So, and I think this is legitimate. I mean, I'm giving the move that Magnus played and say, okay, this is a solid move, let's say, and it's certainly not a bad one. He played it, but please consider this alternative that might be more exciting for your own game. So in these cases, I decided to deviate.
Yeah, you do a nice job generally, I would say, giving the appropriate level of detail about how you decided on a certain move, because obviously you're looking at Magnus's games, but you're also using engines a great amount, as Magnus and Peter Heine Nielsen and his team surely are as well. So what goes into that? How do you utilize engines these days in writing a modern opening course?
Yeah, there are various things that have changed also over the years that I'm writing opening content, print books, online videos. There have been some changes. I've started out when I started out with the first book in 2015. It was released, the Nimzo Bogo book. That was solely done with engine analysis assistance just on a local computer, just a desktop. Or at times maybe even a notebook when I was somehow traveling and still working on it. And this nowadays has changed quite dramatically, because I'm using exclusively cloud engines. I use those engines that have like 30 cores or something like that, or 40, whatever it is. I mean, I think the difference is not that great anymore once you reach these kind of levels. I also keep it simple. D4 was the first course that used Leela 0 as an engine. That was also new and pretty exciting, I have to say, because that was a pretty, it was a revelation at times. Yeah, what the engine was coming up. Yeah, that Leela is sometimes coming up with suggestions that Stockfish wouldn't even consider after 2 minutes, but after 2 minutes it gets there. But it's a move that Leela is coming up with after 5 seconds. And this is sometimes really crazy, because you see Leela's suggestion and it gives a pretty strong evaluation in favor of one side. I mean, I'm not talking +5 or something, but let's say plus 0.7, 0.8, something that is significant, and Stockfish is on 0. And then if you let Stockfish run for 2 minutes, it's getting there. Sometimes, yeah? It's really fascinating. And some of the suggestions also felt, and this is what sounds a bit spooky, felt incredibly human to me, what Leela is suggesting, which is spooky, really, because it's supposed to be this self-learning, neural, somewhat mysterious entity that should supposed to be closer to a human player, and it really is in times. So that was very fascinating to me. So I use mostly Leela and a traditional Stockfish-based engine for analysis. What I used for the first time, and this is actually a little bit embarrassing for the Magnus course, for the first time I now used also correspondence games as a researching field. I never did that before, which is really an omission, because of course, correspondence players nowadays, they have fantastically high level of play, as they all use their computers on a very, very deep search. So there are some pretty impressive cases where you can use the correspondence games. For example, there was one main line in the Sveshnikov that on move 20, which is amazing, it had 43 games in my
Wow.
correspondence chess database, and of those 43 games, White did not win a single game, not a single one, but Black won. I don't know. I have to guess, let's say 8 or 9. Black won a couple and White won 0. And if you have a statistic like that with modern games from 2017, 16, something like that, you pretty much know that the line should be fine. There shouldn't be a big issue there. Of course, this is a very, in the truest sense, theoretical argument because, well, who's reaching move 20?
Right.
It might happen, but it's not very likely to happen. But in an opening that is so excessively sharp as some lines are in the Sveshnikov, you kind of have to dig that deep just for the, let's say, scientific proof that it works. It's not so relevant for players, I think, to know, but you need to have it in there just to show, okay, we are 3 pawns down, but please don't, run away in panic. Yeah, you're fine. Yeah, just relax. You're fine. There's a proof that it works. And I think this has to be in there. You cannot stop in a super dramatic position and say, nothing to see. You're fine.
Right.
You cannot do that. You have to at least have it in. And this is actually something that I feel is very useful on the Chessable platform where I'm publishing the courses, that you can actually pause single lines in your learning process, or you can cut off at a certain point. You can say, okay, stop at move 20 or stop at move 17. Yeah, I don't want to look any deeper. And you can do that on the platform. You can basically customize the depth that you want to have your material presented. And this is, I think, very helpful because then according to your level, you can adjust how much you actually get to see.
Yeah.
This is, I think, that's very helpful.
Yeah, I would go so far as to say club players definitely should make use of that setting. Otherwise, it's just too much to memorize.
Yeah, that's certainly true. On the other hand, one thing that you have to keep in mind that for an opening like the Sveshnikov, the first 8 moves are basically played all of the time. There's 795, but this is like a tabia on move 8 or 9. And even then, if White chooses to take, I mean, we're getting very much into specific lines, but there are some cases where the theory very arguably starts at move 13.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, you just put the first couple of moves on the board, and then you go from there, and then there is a split. This actually makes, I think, the Sveshnikov one of the easiest Sicilians to learn. And I think there is even a book out, called The Easiest Sicilian, and it's about the Sveshnikov. I think this is pretty much true, because you only have a couple of absolute main lines that are theory heavy, and there's not that much more. This is a huge difference, for example, to the Najdorf, which is the other big Sicilian.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
And
six moves for White on move 6. Yeah.
Yeah, 6. You better say 16. No, really. I mean, I have been there. I've had to prepare many people in the Najdorf with White, and on move 6, I mean, I know persons who play 5 or 6 moves there, and there are more. I mean, if you go through that, like bishop e2, bishop c4, bishop g5, f4, and I mean, bishop e3, f3, a3, h3, rook g1,
g3, yeah,
h4. I mean, it's crazy. Basically, everything that's legal has been tried. Yeah. So, and I mean, I'm not saying you need to know something against all of these moves, but some are pretty tricky. And this is not happening so much in the Sveshnikov. I think one reason for that is simply that White's choice is limited due to all the knight moves that he has to play early on. Yeah? Knight f3, d4, b5, a3. So White's position loses so much dynamism. There is not that much choice. I mean, White is basically trading in all those dynamic disadvantages for that big d5 square. And this limits White a lot. He has to get organized at first. And therefore, you don't have much leeway with like moves like a3, h3, those smallish moves that you can sometimes play in other lines. That doesn't really work out there.
Yeah, get you closer to the first time control playing the Sveshnikov.
Yeah, I sometimes wonder if the top level players they have such a deep opening knowledge. I sometimes wonder how deep the preparation is. This is also something that I always feel like a funny part of the ongoing discussion about time controls that is rarely mentioned, that actually people get more and more time in their games simply because the opening theory is expanding so much that the actual time that they spend on decisions is getting longer and longer.
Yeah, that's a really good point, especially at the top levels.
In particular there. And this is kind of a pet peeve of mine. I'm not quite as radical as Greg is, like Greg Shahade is, with reducing the time control. But I think on the top level, you can easily take away like 30 minutes from them, and it wouldn't make a big difference.
Yeah.
Because then they have the situation like what they have actual decision time per move would be the same thing as it was like 20 years ago, when the theory was, I'm just making it up, stopping on move 12, and nowadays they're on move 18 or so. And those 6 moves that they have gained basically in knowledge, they don't really have to think about anymore. And this is something that should be kept in mind a little bit and is rarely mentioned. Yeah. This doesn't apply much for amateurs, of course. There hasn't been a huge difference. Of course, they know more theory nowadays than they did before, but it's not so much of a factor. But on the top level, I mean, sometimes I think half the games are out of memory.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And even at the amateur level, with things like Chessable available, I mean, an amateur player's ability to remember lines has certainly increased, even if they're not going as deep as the professionals.
Yeah, for sure. The tools have become better, more accessible, and they are used. You rarely see people. Let's say if you, I'm just saying, like, let's say 2000 level, you rarely see people playing really bad opening there. It really doesn't happen all that much.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something inaccurate, but it won't be trash. It doesn't happen that much anymore. At least if they work on their chess and they are willing to do something on it, the tools are there and they can get there to play really, really good opening.
Yeah. I mean, and the Sveshnikov obviously is right there at the top, being that Magnus chose it on the biggest stage. I mean, that in itself is quite a stamp of approval. So, I mean, it seems like, based on what you said about your conversations with the folks at Chessable in determining sort of top-down approach to what course to do next. So you did it based on Magnus picking it. So as you dug into the course, without going into too many actual theoretical lines, what proved to be the most testing things that White can do against the Sicilian generally, and the Sveshnikov, or the Sveshnikov particularly?
I think the theoretical status is very okay for Black. In the absolute main lines, I don't see anything really. Like in the open Sicilian, Sveshnikov, I don't see much. I think the most interesting line, what I would probably recommend to White players, if you want to play the open Sicilian, I would probably recommend the 7 knight d5 line, the one that Caruana played in the match 4 times if you include the tiebreak. This is not, I think, a very traditional open Sicilian in a way, because with the knight coming to d5, immediately a pawn gets to d5. Okay, we're getting very specific here on a podcast that is like
right.
Speech only. But I think if you look at the match basically and you check what Fabiano played, this also has become quite fashionable for White. And I think this is something that I would look into, not necessarily because it would give a theoretical edge, but it gets very interesting games. I think it gets interesting, tense games without actually being so much dependent on like move by move knowledge. You can like look at the first, let's say 12, 13 moves and get the idea how the play unfolds. And then I think you're good to go and play it. I think one thing that I really recognized during the research for the course is that in particular Magnus, he has made this, I think, conscious decision in all the sidelines to play for structures where his center is reasonably safe, and then he wants to shift the focus to the king side and actually get a king side attack. This is something that is very, very apparent if you check his choices. He's, for example, in all the sidelines that don't have d4. So let's say In particular, if you look at e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, there is a line knight c3, the delayed open, so to say, yeah, where white delays d4 for one move. And Magnus plays e5, so he puts pawns on e5 and c5, the so-called Botvinnik center. And this is what he tries all of the time, if possible. He plays like that in the Rossolimo and in other lines that have this closed nature, and he wants to freeze the center and then play f5, g5, and get the attack going. So I think this is also maybe a result of the study of the Leela Zero engine.
Right.
That has told us how dangerous, I mean, it sounds so basic because this is how they played in the 19th century. You should go at the king.
Right.
You know, I mean, the king is, that's how in German we say, da ist wo das Tor steht, and that's where you score the goals.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have to go there. And this is what happens a lot in his games. Yeah, you have to check those games. There's a great game that he played against Peter Svidler in the Greinke tournament 2019 that ended with this spectacular mate. Yeah, Peter allowed a mate with pawns on h2 and g2. This is maybe people have seen the final position quite often, I think. And this is from one of those lines where he managed to close down the center. Nothing happened there. And then he shifted the pieces over to the king side and delivered a mating attack. This is, of course, also what happens a lot in the Sveshnikov main lines, that black is basically throwing the kitchen sink at the white king. And I think one of the reasons why this was a consideration was maybe really what happened here with AlphaZero, and just thinking more about very, very abstract sounding game concepts, yeah, like shift more pieces towards the king, even for practical reasons, because it is just dangerous to attack the king. I know it's what you tell little children when like the king is important, but it's something that is rarely, I think, considered on a meta level when you choose openings. And the Sveshnikov and this way of interpretation of the Sicilian is really different to other Sicilians. If you think about this and compare it to lines like, let's say, the Najdorf, there you oftentimes provoke white basically to attack your king, and then you go for counterattack. And the Sveshnikov is not like that at all. You just say, okay, my queen side is going to be a bit weak, and maybe you win a pawn, but I'm still going to throw everything I have at your king. And this is often going to be successful, even if maybe an engine says, this attack shouldn't work, but it will often work in a practical game.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see the influence. AlphaZero obviously also probably played a role, although they and Leela are kind of, I don't know if I'd say connected at the hip, but certainly come from similar schools of engine thought.
Yeah, sure. I'm not really a huge expert in understanding how those things work. I just use them.
Yeah.
I just use them.
Yeah, I'm not an expert either by any means, but we've got a lot to talk about with the course. So I actually, Christof, wanted to dive into a question from a supporter of the podcast and fellow Chessable course author, Han Schut. And so he mentions, and I agree with this. So Han, it's a two-part question, but I just want to give you the first half now, which is, Han says, I think the Quickstarter guide is a great idea. How did Christof come up with the idea and decide to include it? And of course, if you could explain what the Quickstarter guide in your course is first, that would be helpful.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I think, indeed, I'm very, very happy that we came up with that. I'm not quite sure who did that. I don't know. I mean, this is something nowadays. It's much more of a team effort than just one person. Yeah. So I'm certainly on the page that I have written the whole thing, but many concepts and ideas around it are just done by a team. The Quickstarter guide for this course basically means that if you look at the overall course on Chessable, we have 450 something variations that you can learn overall. And what I did is I picked 40 most important ones, like the main lines and the ones that I think show the key ideas for the specific subset of lines the best. And I compiled that to one single chapter. And this is basically the kickoff chapter of the course, where in a condensed form, you see the whole thing. Like you see what are the main lines actually, what is important, what is not so important, and it should provide you with enough ammunition, so to say, to just play it straight away. Just play it in a game that is maybe where you're not afraid maybe to make a mistake and lose. Yeah, it's probably not the best idea to employ it in your most important game ever. Maybe
Right.
do something that you know in and out there. But if you just say, I want to get into this and I want to, let's say, play a blitz game online or something, then if you look at the Quickstarter, it's 40 lines, and it's a little bit cut. It's not like down to move 30 every single time. Just it's a condensed version basically of the course. And it also has this, if you get it with the video edition, it has 2 hours basically me telling you everything you need to know to get started with the thing. And I think this is very helpful. One thing that is pretty clear, and it applies to print books and online courses, is you have a chapter, some sort of chapter structure in every single book. And if you open up the book, you think, okay, what should I check first? And you don't quite know. You know what maybe the main line is, but I think it's best to actually get the whole thing on the road, to know a little bit of everything, so that you're not completely blank if someone plays a certain variation. Like, I mean, let's say you start with the sidelines. So you learn, okay, this is the wing gambit, and this is the Smith-Morra gambit, and this is whatever, the closed. And then you're still like maybe a week away from seeing what the actual Sveshnikov looks like. So with the Quickstarter, you see a little bit of everything, and it gets you at exactly what it is. It gets you started to play it in games and enjoy it right away, before actually looking at 400 something lines. And yeah, I think it's a good one, and I will definitely have this in future courses as well. I'm actually thinking about, if somebody is listening who has older courses of mine, I'm actually thinking of creating that for older courses as well.
Yeah.
So as an additional content. It's a bit difficult actually for the E4 and D4 courses, because you have to look at so many replies that it's a bit difficult to choose the essential ones that should be in a Quickstarter.
Yeah. I really loved it too. I mean, obviously it's great for players, and as you say, you can read through that in a few hours and then get in there and play some blitz and take things from there. But it's great for podcast hosts too, Christof, because when I always try to read my guests' books, but in this case, I read the whole Quickstarter guide, and I was like, well, I probably don't need to memorize 20 moves of theory for this podcast. So it was a perfect thing for me to get like an overview of the opening without getting too deep in the weeds.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to start with, and I think also, I mean, there are people are different, but I'm the kind of person, if I get any new product, let's say, I don't know, a smartphone or whatever it is, any kind of technical device, I never read the manual. Do you read the manual?
No, yeah.
Never. I never do that. I want to play with it right away. And okay, it's a bit difficult to say play with the opening right away, but this is at least a very condensed way. Let's say take 2 hours or whatever you need. Everybody is different there, but then you need, I think, the basic lines. We also, for this course, we have a promo video there in 2 parts, which is very close to the Quickstarter actually. So if you want to get an overview of the course, there are 2 hours free that you can watch, and this is a pretty much good overview of the Sicilian. So and Chessable has a short and sweet Magnus Sicilian as well. So there are many extracts of the course where you can get a really good picture of if you might like it or not. I honestly think that many people should like it, because such an entertaining opening. It was absolutely fun to write it. I really have to say that that was maybe the most enjoyable book to write, because some of the lines are so crazy looking,
yeah,
and really really fun to analyze. So I think it could be attractive to many players.
Yeah, it's so much fun for black, and it's, as you say, it's doing well enough theoretically that my main concern is just that the main line against 2 knight c6 is just going to be the Rossolimo, and if you play this if you play the Sveshnikov, like you'll get to play it maybe, I don't know, 40-50% of the time. That's my concern. Do you think that's a valid concern?
Absolutely, yeah, it is. I think the Rossolimo is three bishop b5. It is already quite popular, even on let's say club level or amateur level. And I mean, I had this in my e4 book, right, for white for some reason. I think it's perfectly reasonable to play that, and you probably will get it more and more. However, I don't think that this line is really giving white an objective advantage. It just gets the game into somewhat a slower kind of pace, certainly.
Right.
Yeah? It's not as exciting. Even though I think depending on how well white is knowing the lines and the concepts, you can still play. I'm recommending basically again what Magnus has done in many games. He played g6 most of the time against it, and then tried to build up this Botvinnik center with e5. And in some games, he really got some action with f5, and things were heating up pretty quickly there as well. So there are ways to make it exciting. What I think against the Rossolimo, what is in black's favor in some ways, that you have a pretty wide choice what you can play against it. Obviously now for a course, and it's a repertoire, not a full overview of every single possibility, but black has a wide choice. You can go g6 and e6 as the main lines. And even within those, you can actually vary quite a bit. I think the most dangerous line probably is bishop b5, g6, and the immediate capture on c6. This is what you see most of the time. And there even you have this fundamental choice of d takes or b takes. I went for d takes because if you look at Magnus's games, he played that 80% of the time, maybe 90% of the time. But b takes is perfectly valid and was also played by him. And I had to make some of those judgment calls when he played both lines. So both lines have their stamp of approval, and then I had to pick one. But that means that the reader has also options. As usual, you don't need to copy every single line that is suggested. If you like b takes c6 there, why not go for that? And you can be easily a moving target there. You can play many different lines that all are okay, but again, they're not so exciting as
it's just a totally different style of game. And I mean, it's good that Magnus was able to liven things up a little bit, but
what I think, however, in the Rossolimo is that it's a different type of game, but it is a kind of game where there are not many trades going on.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it is a full position. It is a sometimes slower position, but it is something where probably you can still, let's say, get a spicy dinner at the end. It just takes longer to cook. Something like that is maybe a good way to see it. It's often just also a matter of attitude. If you want to get some fight on the board, you will get it there. In general, I think what I felt was a good experience that many of the, even let's say, the Rossolimo is not a sideline. This is a complete mainline nowadays. But what was good to see is how harmless many of the sidelines are. Like on move 2, something lines like, let's say, 2c3, the Alapine or the closed, or lines that are played very often on the club level, they are really pretty harmless. Mm-hmm. And like, I think can get a good game even without knowing all that much. And I made a pretty clear choice not to overcover the sidelines. I wanted to give good ideas against them, but I didn't want to go to move 20 in the close Sicilian. I don't think that makes any sense. Black is pretty much equalizing quickly, and I think this is good to know. And often it's actually interesting. It's not like it's boring.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Well, just a little bit more on the course before we move on to other things, Christof. One thing was I wanted to, as a sort of prelude, to mention that it was cool to see that Magnus came down from his mountaintop and tweeted about your course, sending a recommendation. Of course, Chess24, which Magnus's company now co-owns, and Chessable are affiliated, but you wouldn't think that he would lend his name to something if he thought it was a crap product nonetheless. So that was cool to see, just as someone who's friendly with you and always rooting for you guys. And with that prelude out of the way, here's the second part of Hans Schut's question. He asks, what kind of feedback did Peter Heine Nielsen and Magnus Carlsen provide on the Fight Like Magnus course? Did they actually look at the variations, or was it more generic?
I had to, that was actually something that this whole the whole way it is presented now, that was not yet set in stone like 3 weeks ago. It wasn't really planned that far in advance. We had the course on the way, and then all of a sudden the idea came up. Okay, what if we really ask Magnus about it? Like if he wants to be there, more exposed, and really lent his name there. And yeah, well, I compiled, or I have the PGN file ready with all the lines and all the pros, and it was sent to Team Carlsen, and they checked it. Obviously, I cannot tell you how long they did that. I mean, they really made a check. It was not like a marketing stunt that he's just on the. He is really. They really checked it, and I mean, I'm not particularly surprised that it is okay. I mean, I put so much work into it. I would be really shocked if they said, okay, this is complete nonsense. Right. I mean, it's based on his moves and his line selection. So, while certainly there can be single, wrong assessments there and so on, I don't think the general product is flawed. That's pretty much not possible. So I got just a generally good feedback. They didn't really send a huge text like, okay, that was good, that was not so good. Yeah, it was just like, okay, good stuff, go ahead.
Yeah, and I know in the book there were certain parts where you're trying to sort of parse what he would do, because like there might be a certain line where he hasn't, it's a topical line, but he hasn't faced it, something like that. But as you say, having these 3,500 engines to consult in those situations is certainly helpful.
Yeah, definitely. But still, in some cases you can only guess. Yeah, there are even some reasonably not super main lines, but fairly popular lines that he never got on the board. And I was surprised in one or two cases that nobody tried that. Not that it seemed super threatening, but like compared to some other lines where I felt like, oh my God, this is so harmless. Why are they doing that? Yeah, I felt, why not try this and that? But they never did. And in those cases, I had to come up with my own ideas. But the important thing for those lines is they should be somewhat similar to the spirit of the other ones. So they shouldn't be totally different. And I think that is the most important thing, that people have some kind of consistent pattern or set of ideas that ties the whole thing together. And this is most important in the line selection for those lines.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just in closing on this course, I would say listeners definitely give it a look. And as Christof has said, if you're unsure, there's plenty of free material to check out and evaluate. But I really enjoyed this book, and it's especially with the Keep It Simple. It made me want to just hop online and play chess. It just made me want to try it out. So mission accomplished on your part. So pivoting subjects, Christof, or it's a small pivot, I would say, but I wanted to talk a little bit more generally about the topic of chess courses and chess books. I feel like you're in a unique position because you've been working hard for Chessable, putting out some great content, and of course, listeners should check out, if you haven't already, our very early interview. You were my 6th guest. I was so excited when you agreed to come on. I didn't know you at all. And then I re-listened to the conversation, and I think it holds up really well. It gives a lot of background into how you built your chess career and how you made a name for yourself. So if any newer listeners should go back and listen to that. But one thing that you did, Christof, that's unique is you made your Chessable course, and then the Keep It Simple E4 course was so well received that New in Chess reached out to you and turned it into a print book. And then the print book won Book of the Year award. So it's that's sort of a unique way in, and gives sort of a unique springboard to talk about the direction that chess content is going. So I wanted to read a question from another Chessable course author and supporter of the show, FM Andrei Terekov, who wrote in and asked, so here's Andrei's words. he says, oh, and thank you for the support, Andre, by the way. Andre says, it seems like we're witnessing a paradigm shift in the preferred mechanisms of learning. In the past, the only ways to learn chess were coaches and books. Today, the most popular way of learning chess seems to be online tools like Chessable, YouTube videos, Twitch streams, not to mention endless sessions of online blitz or bullet. What are the pros and cons of these options in your opinion? And do you think that chess books are a dying breed?
Yeah, the dying breed is probably too much to say. But I do think that as you see, I probably should start differently. Nowadays you have different kind of people, of course, playing chess. You have the younger generation who grew up with computers, with smartphones, and things like that. And I think for them, it's much more natural to use an online resource, like a video or like an interactive opening course on Chessable, for example. For them, it's much more natural to use that. But for the somewhat older generation, let's say you're a little bit younger than I am, right?
I think a few years. I'm 42.
Yeah, so like 3 years difference, not much. Like we are maybe on that. It's kind of, we're not pre-digital, but I mean, it depends. Yeah, I mean, our peers, sometimes they really are not much of computer persons, but some are. And
yeah.
But if you look at like somewhat older, let's say 50-year-olds or 60-year-olds, they are much more closer to a book. It's very difficult to convince them in some way to try like an interactive learning tool. But if you go, the younger you go, the more natural it becomes for them. And I think over time, the use of books will go lower, because for them it's pretty much strange to use a book. It's just not the natural way of doing things. And this is not actually, by the way, something that I want to see as positive or negative. It's just, I think it's just what's going to happen.
Right.
It's a natural development in some way. In some cases, I think the way it is done online is actually really better than with a print book. For example, for chess opening content, I'm really very confidently on the page that it's better to do it online. I really think you get to learn more in a certain period of time, and the tools are just so much better. Yeah, you can actually see the board with every variation pretty much quickly. You don't have to set it on the actual chessboard. I mean, if you have a print book and you really set the board and pieces and so on, it takes a long time. And it's very difficult to follow lines that are given in the book when you don't have a diagram to help you. And I mean, some opening analysis is quite deep. I think it's really difficult to do that. It's much, much more efficient to do that online. In other parts, however, I think working with a book and with real pieces and a board can be pretty beneficial, in particular when we're talking about more complex middle game ideas. Yeah, if you take a book, which is fantastic and certainly mentioned a lot on the podcast, I think it was mentioned a lot, the first book by Boris Gelfand, The Positional Decision Making in Chess.
Yeah,
a really, really great book on positional chess. This is just ideal, really, to you make a good mug of coffee or tea or whatever you like. Yeah, you sit down at a board, you put the pieces on, and then you really do it at your own pace and enjoy really great explanations. And I think this is something that can be done very well on a real chessboard. But just the rote learning of moves or certain variations, it's just much better online.
Yeah.
In this case, if you ask me about the print books that I'm still, of course, producing, I did the Keep It Simple E4, and the Keep It Simple D4 is currently at the printer, actually, as we speak. So when the podcast is actually released, it could be even available to order. I'm not really doing this, to be perfectly honest, for much of a, let's say, financial reasoning. Like, it really takes time to convert a Chessable course into a print book. It takes a lot of time, actually more than you might think. I'm basically doing that for the fans, because
Wow.
I always get people that ask me, you need to make a print book, because I like print books. And I thought twice if I should keep it simple D4 as a print book, because it's rather a lot of work, and it's not work that I enjoy very much, to be honest. It's very technical,
Yeah.
You have a certain format, like a computer PGN format, and you have to really get this into a word processing software, and it's for me personally, I hate this kind of work. I don't like it. And I was really thinking, should I do this again? But people could ask me again and again, I want a real book in my hands. And then, okay, let's do it. Yeah. And this is why Keep It Simple D4 is again going to be a print book. It's not clear what's happening with the Magnus course, because this is a tad more complicated in terms of copyright ownership,
Oh, okay. Why is that?
Honestly, I'm not quite sure how the actual situation is there, because we have different parties involved. Yeah, we have Chessable, Chess24, me, and it's also the question, how should a print book be done with this kind of content? It's not going to be it's just not as large in terms of lines and so on. The best way to say it's undecided.
Okay.
In some cases, it was like with Keep It Simple D4. When I started this project, it was clear that we make a book out of it, because it's a twin. It's a twin to the E4 book.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really like when I had the E4 book out, that was the first day that was released. People called me actually. I play D4. I cannot use that. You need to do another one. and that was pretty much a given that this would be done. But with the Magnus book, that wasn't really a thought from the beginning. So it could happen for sure, but it's not clear yet.
Okay, that's interesting, because my first thought when I saw it was like this would be a big seller if it were a print book. Although it's also interesting to me to hear that people still request opening books, because obviously here on Perpetual Chess we love chess books. We talk about them all the time, but I agree with you that opening books about openings in particular are better suited to online. I think every other aspect of chess you could argue either way. Although certainly something like 100 Endgames You Must Know is great for Chessable and stuff like that. But openings in particular, I mean, it just seems like you're wasting your time if you're using a paper book.
It's really sometimes, when I'm recognizing that over and over, is when I'm writing something myself and I'm using print books as reference. Yeah, because you have to check what other guys wrote before you, or let's say for the Sicilian course, I needed to check the recommendations of people like Neji in their Sicilian books, or John Shaw in their Playing E4 book, and so on. And I had to look at those books. And I'm not dissing the authors. I'm just dissing the format. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a bit strange sometimes. You have this, a maze of variations, and like, okay, where exactly is that what I'm looking at? And it's really difficult sometimes to I mean, I really see at this moment, or at this particular moment, how much better a well thought out online platform is for that. I think for openings and for basic endings, it's ideal. It's really ideal. And it's in tactics. Yeah, tactics, I think, is also, you can argue that tactic trainers are probably more effective than like having a print book, and then, okay, with a print book and you just have a list of, let's say, chess diagrams, puzzles that you solve. It's kind of similar to online, but it's not going to be advantageous to have it in print. I think for those, the decision is pretty clear. For some other books, I think it's not as clear. That it's kind of maybe a matter of taste for some people. But I think what Han wrote, that was from Andre.
Andre,
right?
yeah.
I don't think they're a dying breed at all. What I know, what I hear is that the book sales are not going down.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing, of course. I'm happy that people get books and try to learn chess and want to learn to play better. But I think in general, there should be a bit of a shift to online content. It's certainly happening. What you also mentioned is playing a lot online, like Blitz and Bullet. I don't really think that Bullet helps all that much.
Right.
Even though I'm guilty of playing too much 1+1. That's my time sometimes.
I've been there. I'm a recovering addict.
Yeah, I mean, I was really happy. I was off it for 1 year. Yeah, 1 year, and then during really one of those working sessions that was, I think, for the D4 book, I really felt like I need to take a break, and then I was firing up and then like 1+1, and then I was there again for 30 minutes. Like, no, what did I do? That was a waste of time.
Right.
But okay, I think on the other hand, if you take a little bit longer online, let's say 5-minute blitz or rapid games, better even, they can be useful. They can be useful to check openings, test out things, and just have like material, like your own games to draw conclusions from. Because oftentimes the type of mistake that you're making is the same in every time control.
Yeah,
it's really the same thing. I mean, if you're really, really bad, let's say at end games, you're going to be bad in tournament chess and bad in blitz. I mean, it's just like it's the same thing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And
you can draw conclusions in some way. I mean, if you're generally able to draw conclusions, this is sometimes a big problem, that people have a pretty wrong self-diagnosis of themselves. And this is where, by the way, the point of coaches come in. Yeah? Are they necessary? Necessary is strong, but certainly helpful.
Yeah. And speaking of categorizing your games into types of mistakes, Christof, I know that you were really insightful in that in our first conversation. And the other thing that you said that I think about all the time, and I sort of feel like, or quote to my students, and feel like I should be paying you royalties on, is just that chess is a game of mistakes, that it's always decided by some sort of mistake, even when there's tactics. So I think of you a lot, even even when we're not conversing.
Yeah, that is, I think that was one of the more in-depth talking points that we had in the first interview.
Yeah.
I also think about that. I didn't re-listen the first one. I thought about it, but I just didn't have the time.
Yeah, well, no need to rehash it too much. I just wanted to give you credit while I have you here. So while we're on the topic of chess improvement and chess books, have you seen any other books since we spoke last? I know that you recommended the classic Shereshevsky book, Endgame Strategy, last time we talked, and mentioned a few other classics. Is there anything that's caught your eye in the past few years?
Yeah, I mentioned the Gelfand book already. This is one of my absolute favorites, the positional decision-making in chess. He also had the tactical decision-making, that was also good, but I thought not as stellar. I think great explanations really are more suitable for strategically focused books, where you really get to learn just sometimes how a simple sentence can capture the essence of a position. This is something that is really fascinating. And if you have a really good book on middle games, there was one instance in the Gelfand book where he made it very clear that you don't need a grand plan. Like, how do you win the game? You don't need to know that during the game. You just need to know the next step. You need to just figure out, is there a way forward for me in this position? Can I do something? And then you do that, and then you see where it leads to. You don't need to figure out the whole path through the jungle. You just have to cut the next tree, let's say. And these little things, they can be really revelations for players. Yeah, I've done this little part, for example, with many students, and it was, for some people, they really try to figure out during the game how I'm going to win. And that is really not important. You just have to check out what the next step is in your potential progress in the game. That, of course, heavily applies for strategically focused positions. If you just have to calculate your way through a mating attack, it's a different thing.
Right.
But if you just have to make a long-term decision, should I place the pawns like that, or should I trade this rook, things like that, you just have to figure it out. Then you just have to figure out the next decision. And often, as Gelfand put it, you just need positions that that have options for you, where you can do certain things. If you can do some things, you can make some headway on one side of the board, or you can change the position, for better or worse maybe, but you can change it. You're often the one who's having an initiative, or who's having an advantage, opposed to the side who can just sit and wait. And these are really insights that help a lot. And this is the kind of thing where I said it's good to sit there, with a good, I don't know, what your preferred beverages, and you just kind of think, this is really, really good stuff. This is good insight to learn. This book was really one of the highlights of the last couple of years. A book that I also heavily recommend is the Game Changer book.
Yeah,
that is really, really great. The only thing that I have to say is, and maybe it's just me, but did you understand how AlphaZero worked?
No, not completely.
Not really, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and I was thinking, and I mean, I have a bit of a background in IT when I was just working my regular office job, and I was not a programmer. I cannot code, but I was working with programmers all of the time, like giving them, let's say, the instruction for what to program, so to say. So I can kind of relate to many things IT, and I didn't understand it at all. I mean, how a neural network works and so on. Yeah. I was like, am I so stupid to understand that, or is that really, really complicated? And I thought, it's really complicated.
Yeah, the whole Monte Carlo thing.
It was really difficult. Yeah. And at the end of the day, I think what everybody can take from the book, even somebody who is really not a computer person at all, is how beautiful the games were.
Yeah.
They were just so great to watch. I mean, after we got those games, I was really just like some weeks after, I was having a lecture at my club. I'm doing a monthly lecture at my chess club, and of course I titled this one, a computer that plays like Tal. Yeah, and that was, and it really is like that. It's just like super spectacular. And this is just also where the book shines. It's just like the subject is so fantastic that you have so many great games to look at and great insight also. And this is, of course, more, it's very sophisticated. That insight, how AlphaZero evaluates certain positions in opposed to how a traditional alpha beta engine evaluates it. This is very nerdy stuff already, but it's very fascinating if you really deal with that every single day. But even if you're not into that, you have the great games with great annotations. And this is also what Matthew Sadler, and I'm not sure who did what, and what Natasha Regan did, what Matthew did, but I think they're just wonderfully annotated.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah, so that's really a great book. And I wonder if there's something else. I have to say that I really am down on my chess book consumption.
Yeah, well, you seem pretty busy.
Yeah, since I'm writing so much myself, I'm really not. I'm getting the if you look at opening theory, I'm getting the big books, let's say, because I feel I need them as reference, like those GM repertoires and so on. Yeah, I'm getting those. But I'm not really sitting down much with an opening book nowadays and learn stuff. If I want to learn an opening, I'm writing about it myself.
Yeah, and I noticed your presentation. I know you do some banter blitzes for Chess24, but your YouTube content has slowed down as well.
Yeah, extremely. Unfortunately, really, but it's kind of difficult to get it all together and make it. I mean, I also have reduced the amount of lessons that I give. Really reduced it a lot. Nowadays, I'm, let's say, 80% of the time is content creation for Chessable mostly, or at times for print book versions of the Chessable courses. This is more than 80% nowadays. And most of the time, it's not 40 hours a week, but rather more.
Wow!
It's difficult to get the YouTube channel, get it to some steady flow. I want to try that more, really, because this is where I'm coming from, and I'm still enjoying doing those light-hearted videos. I really do. I just did one today after a really long break, and I hope that this is something that I can do more frequently for the channel. I mean, I'm on pretty frequently, yeah, due to the shows and so on, but it's not so much on my home channel,
Yeah.
so to say. I want to do a little bit more there, but it's again difficult to handle. I just wonder about the books. Well, if there was something else that I particularly liked. Yeah, it's a tough question. I didn't really think about this that much before, but I mean, what I told you is definitely what came to our mind first. So these are probably the ones that stand out. At least.
Well, I don't think Perpetual Chess listeners are hurting for book recommendations.
That's definitely true.
We keep them pretty busy, so
yeah. I actually did a huge re-listen, let's say, of. Oh, no, re-listen is the wrong term. I mean, like binge listening is probably the right the right word of your podcast in recent weeks, actually, because I found a new way to combine listening and doing something else. I'm now listening through to the podcast while cooking.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, this is not too bad. I just put the headphones on and switch it on. And I mean, many episodes are like roughly 1 hour.
Yeah.
And that pretty much is, cooking a really well thought out meal and eating it. Yeah. So this fits very well. And I just listened to an episode 2 hours ago, let's say, before while cooking. So it's you have to find your time spots. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm honored that players of your caliber. I mean, I want everyone, all chess fans. I want this to be accessible to all chess fans, but sometimes that means I'm always pleasantly surprised when even players of your caliber with your knowledge of the industry are still able to learn from it.
It's really great. I mean, there are many episodes where I'm really excited about the guests, people like Tukmakov or Kamsky. It's like just great to get them, just to listen to them. You never have that.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't happen. So this is just great. But I also enjoyed very much to get some insight into areas of chess that you really don't know much about. Let's say the adult improvers. I listened to a couple of those. I found that very interesting. Also for my chess teaching. Yeah, so what do other people do? Yeah, it was very, very interesting. And so it's really a wide range. And there were also some interviews. I really don't quite remember the names. It's good stuff. I've listened to most of the episodes, I think.
Yeah. Well, you were the strongest player. Whoever told me that they enjoyed the adult improver episodes. I mean, they're amongst my most popular. So that I'm always happy to do them. But that I was happy to hear that, and I also think it speaks well upon you that you don't have sort of like an elitist attitude. You see the full spectrum of the chess world.
Yeah, I was amazed by some of those episodes, really. I remember, was that, what was the name? Megan Chen?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I think what she said is like, she must play more chess in a year than I played like in 10 years.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, and works full time. It's crazy.
It's fantastic. And like, oh my God, how can you be so dedicated? I mean, I know I'm a complete nutcase myself, just differently. Yeah, with writing and whatnot. Yeah, I mean, I can write 12 hours a day, and at the end of the day, I relax, and then like 5 minutes later, I put on some chess video. I must be crazy. Yeah, but it is different. Yeah, but it was interesting. There's so many interesting stories there that you can listen to. So I think I've listened to almost all of them.
That's really cool. I'm really glad to hear that, and I'm sure if any of our previous adult improver guests are listening, they'll be happy to hear that as well. And hopefully you get some useful info for your students.
In terms of books, by the way, I just wanted to say one thing that really stood out to me in recent years when I was teaching. And that also relates to this topic of making mistakes and mistakes as part of the game. I think that modern books really have come a long way. They are in many cases, much better than the older ones. And I think one part of it is that nowadays, I think the approach is a little bit more scientific at times. Mm-hmm. We want to get a little bit closer to the absolute truth of what happened in a game. And if you look at some older annotations, and we don't even have to go back to whatever, to Alekhine or so, we don't have to go back that far. There is not really, I think, a consistent search for finding out why a certain game ended in the way that it ended. I can give you one example, and this was really striking to me. For my students, I have a lesson that I'm doing quite often. Like I prepared this, and I have done this with many different people and groups. I prepared some endgames played by Ulf Andersson, the Swedish legend. By the way, this is also somebody I would love to have on the podcast.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I don't know. He wasn't requested all that much, and I don't know if he would do it, but it would be like, wow, would be great. Anyway, so I was looking at Ulf Andersson's endgames, and I picked out some, maybe half a dozen endgames, and there was one that I found particularly interesting that was played against Robert Hübner, the German grandmaster in, I think, 1981, Johannesburg. They had a match there of I don't know, 6 games, and it was a rook ending that started on move 23. So they traded down the whole board, to just rooks and I think 7 pawns each. And a position where you could easily just make a draw. But they didn't. They played on, and Ulf went on to win the game in a very instructive, nice fashion. But I found this book in this game in a book. And amazingly, in that book, Black Hübner, who lost, did not get a single question mark. He didn't even get a critical remark about any of his moves. It was just like, okay, here Hübner prevents this and that. Here he does this and that. It was mostly descriptive of what he was doing. But there was never a single case of saying, well, this was not the best defense because white now makes a certain progress here and there. It was just not a critical way of trying to figure out how did white win. Wolf's moves were often, let's say, applauded, like, oh, this is a good move. That's nice, but how exactly did it come that this good move was possible? It wasn't explained at all. And I was pretty frustrated, and I wanted to find out what was wrong. And I then did a lesson. I did this in a lesson, and together with a student who was already a strong player, we found that at a certain point there was a mistake that we thought would be probably decisive. And it wasn't in the book that I had. And then I thought, okay, let's look at other books, because this position is often discussed in a book. And then I found an older book by John Nunn, who's a very good author. And he also didn't tell me what was wrong. It was crazy. I thought he must somehow get to that point where, what did Hübner do wrong? And there is not a single point of criticism of Black's moves. It was like somehow Ulf created the win out of nothing, like a miracle.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and that's not happening. It's really not happening. There must have been something wrong. And finally, in the third book that I was looking at, I found the game again. And that was actually a pretty good book. That is from Amateur to IM, from Jonathan Hawkins.
Yeah.
And he had this end game in the book. And I was really so relieved. He had exactly the same move as the decisive mistake that the student and I thought was the final mistake, the important mistake that Hübner made. And finally, and that is the most recent book of all those books.
Right.
And he got there. He said, okay, this is a question mark, and this is actually where you learn something from the thing. Because Hübner, what he did is he allowed one of his pawns to be set as a long-term weakness. And funny enough, the final move of the game is the move where the white rook takes that weak pawn. So it's kind of possible to figure it out if you really go there. And I think the older you go in the history of the books, the more they have this kind of attitude that the winner, and this is instructive, don't get me wrong, where the winner is creating something out of thin air. Mm-hmm. And you have to get more to the point to understand what went wrong for the losing side. And of course, you need to see how to exploit the mistakes, but you have to finally get to the point where, okay, what was actually the mistake? And this is, I think, getting better and better. If you look at a book like the Gelfand book, he's totally on that page. Yeah, he has the question marks that are really the mistakes. It's all beautifully balanced. Like you see what the loser of the game did wrong and what the winner did well and not so well. So it's a much more, I think, scientific and more correct approach. So I'm really glad that it's getting there. But it's like this is something that you have to keep in mind also when you look at older books. Ask yourself, is it clear to you why the guy who lost the game, why he lost?
Right.
Is that clear to you now? Do you really? And it's just like very, very often, just out of courtesy, people are not mentioning that. That is very, very much apparent if you look at really old games, like Alekhine. There's a famous game, of course, that many people will know, Botvinnik Capablanca. This is a classic from, I think, is it Nottingham or is it the Avro tournament? The winning move is Bishop A3. I think this is a game that people maybe have seen. It's the win that Botvinnik had over Capablanca. And I've seen, I think, 2 or 3 YouTube videos on that. And it's great to feature the game because it's a great game. But there's not a single mention of a mistake by Black. He lost. Why? Why did he lose? Nobody knows. And you can criticize people, even if they are one of the greatest players of the world of all time. They are perfectly aware of their shortcomings. Everybody is. If you ask the top players today, they know that they make mistakes.
So, Christof, we had the unusual case where the recording dropped basically mid-sentence, but you had just mentioned that modern players are, of course, aware and not afraid to point out their own mistakes, but that's changed a little bit as compared to older books. And you then just mentioned to me that you've seen a couple other books that you want to mention.
Yeah, exactly. Because just when it came to that point that this type of more objective criticism of your own mistakes and so on, this is something that was really standing out in one book that I really liked and should be considered by many players willing to improve. That is Sam Shanklin's book, Small Steps to Chess Improvement. Is it the right word?
I think to giant improvement. Maybe?
To giant, exactly. Yeah, it has this funky moon landing picture, right? This is really great. I think it was really one of the highlights for me of the last year. He had really excellent material there compiled. Many of his own games, many of his mistakes. Some of his best moments. It's a compilation of everything, and is very self-critical at times. With really, I think it's really tough to describe how he is phrasing this sometimes. It's just a nicer way of writing. Okay, I'm an idiot sometimes.
Yeah.
It's just really, really nice to read. It's very, very, very honest, very humble. And I think it's really, really a well done book. I really liked it a lot. And he's currently the release of the second book is just around the corner, I think.
Yeah, exciting.
It's just around the corner. It should be on Chessable in a couple of days, and this is I think the first one that will be on Chessable and print at the same time.
That'll be interesting.
It was I think developed at the same time. Sam was actually in the Netherlands to record the videos, and this is going to be on very soon, I think in a couple of days. And the print book also is going to be out. It's a successor, also about pawn play, I think, just a bit more. Yeah, and pawn play is, of course, very important. And the other book, that is not something that was ever mentioned, but I really liked it. And that is a book by Tibor Karolyi, the Hungarian chess author and theoretician. He wrote a really nice little book. It's not such a huge tome, and it's called Endgame Virtuoso Magnus Carlsen, where he looked at all of Magnus's endgames. Really, I think all of them. And what I liked about this book a lot, actually, and it sounds maybe odd, is that it does not have so many variations. It just is a compilation of Magnus's endgames, and it just gives very, very nicely done, in my view, the key moments and the key decisions, like what piece to trade, what piece to keep. You should place the pawns in this and that way. And it's not like bombarding you with like, okay, here's a rook endgame and there's a 20 move line that now was calculated. It's not like that. It's just trying to show key moments and key decisions. What is a good piece and a bad piece? So I think it's a very accessible book for many people. And I think there are just many fans out there of the world champion. So if you like Magnus in general and like his games, that is a great way to combine that with improving your endgame skills. I think it's a very nice book also to give to even to junior players. Often they are fans of Magnus and they are not really fans of endgames.
Right, yeah.
So you have a good one here. Look at this. Magnus is playing very well in the endgame. Yeah, maybe you enjoy this to look through yourself, or you can, of course, do it together with the student. It can be a way to get endgame strategy, let's say, to players who are maybe not so much keen on doing that. So, and I really felt the simplicity was key. It's not trying to completely overload you with details that you probably cannot understand anyway, depending on who's reading it. So it just gets points across, I think, very nicely, and it's nicely written. Cowley is actually a really good writer. He's not mentioned a lot, I think, on the podcast. He also has done a really great 2-volume book about Karpov's strategic wins. This is older. This is why I didn't mention it before, because that is from a couple of years ago. But this is really great. 2 books with all of Karpov's strategically focused wins, which he had many of. So there's lots of great material and I think great annotation. This is on a much higher level than the Magnus book, of course. But it's something that if you are, let's say, already 1900, 2000, something like that, and you feel you want to do something about your strategic abilities and you want to do it based on games, the Karpov books by Cowley, good stuff. Yeah, I think.
That's great. And Christof, really I'm almost ready to let you go, but one follow-up question on endgames. I'm curious personally, because whenever I get to working on my game, end games are going to be a priority. How important do you think it is to actually drill the basic end games, like you mentioned, 100 end games you must know on Chessable, or for the more advanced player, Dvoretsky's end game manual? How important is it to actually drill specific positions as opposed to sort of appreciating transitions and attacking weaknesses, like in the Karolyi books you mentioned, and endgame strategy and books like that?
That's a really tough one. Like if you want to decide, you have a certain amount of time. Do you do the one thing or do you do the other thing? It depends a little. It's really tough to say. I think if you let's say look at the 100 endgames, and I think you could probably get by with only knowing 40 of them and still be somewhat okay. I think you're not going to do well without knowing, let's say, the concept of opposition in a pawn ending, or without the Lucena position. This is something that wouldn't work. But some of the more sophisticated basic ones, let's say, you probably can get by without, because they won't happen that often. In general, I think the 100 endgames is something that you should know. It really makes a lot of sense. Let's say maybe not every one of them, and you will forget some. It is just what's going to happen. But this is definitely what every really ambitious player should know. The general decision making, like what to trade, what not to trade. This is also something that if you study that and you get to a certain point of understanding, a certain level of understanding, you can make this decision often instantly because of experience and intuition. Like, okay, this is not such a great piece, I should trade it. You don't need a long time for that. So once you have developed that, you are able to apply that on almost every time control. But for the very basic ones, you have the issue that if the time control is really fast, like it's a rapid game from the get-go, or you're in the final stages of a classical game where you're also down, it's very difficult if you don't know the basic ending to calculate. Yeah. Because you cannot base it on some general assumption. You have to calculate. And sometimes you can figure it out if you have enough time. But if you don't have enough time, you really have to just know it. There's just really no way around that. So I think it's equally important. It's about equally important.
Okay.
You need a bit of time to get to the general understanding, and then maybe this thing with the general understanding is something that you acquire once and don't lose. And the end game ability, you could forget some of those things.
Yeah, for sure.
And it makes sense maybe to repeat them. Yeah, that can be certainly one thing. I wanted to, or do you have some other question? Please go ahead. But
no, go ahead.
Yeah, one thing that I wanted to mention is we have one potential guest for your show, right? With Anderson. We got there basically by coincidence. Another guest that I would love to have on your show, and I don't know if this is possible, but have you thought about getting Artur Yusupov on your show?
Yeah, I mean, I've dreamed of it, of course. That would be incredible. Yeah, maybe.
Maybe you should try. I mean, I got to know him a little bit this year because we did, I think, 2 or 3 rounds of live on-site commentary for the German Youth Championships. I had this really a very nice job this year. I did, this is a 9-round tournament, with starting from under 10, and it goes like under 10, under 12, and so on till under 18. So it's a huge event, and we had a live commentary on site and broadcast on the net. And I was the host, and I had co-commentators, which was really great. I got to know Vincent Keimer, the German prodigy, a little bit. We did 2 rounds together, and it was amazing because I always had to slow him down. Yeah,
right.
He was just like spitting out variation after variation, and I always said, Vincent, can you please tell the audience why you did that? He was very quick with everything, and obviously a really great talent. But I also had the privilege to do 2 or 3 rounds with Artur, and he's such a great person, and he would be one of the guests that I would really love to have on your show. And he's probably has so much to tell. It's going to be very, very, very long and rich conversation. Yeah, he has written so much and so on. It was very, very, and he's such a nice guy. I mean, I was really in awe how he can be such a nice person. During the broadcast, when we did the commentary, at one point he said, I have to leave. I have to comfort all the children that just lost. He had many students playing, of course, and he said, I have to comfort the little girls that they cry now after their games, and he really meant it. It was not fun. It was not fun. So if you can get Artur on the show, that would be
we'll put a good word in next time you see him, because that would be amazing. So maybe I can get the contact going. And I know if he would be willing, or I mean, I don't know, but he's a really, really great guy, and very much it was a really memorable experience, because when I started chess in the late 1980s, he was really fighting for the highest titles. He was in the semifinal of the World Championship match cycle. He beat Ivan Schut in that fantastic rapid game. That's the best rapid game ever, Brussels 91. And that was stuff that I watched live back then. And it was really meeting one of the heroes of youth, so to say. And then it was a very, very memorable experience for me. And this will probably happen next year as well. I think they want me back to do this again. And Artur is always there because he has all those kids that he coaches at the championship. So he will be on again. It was really funny. It was really very entertaining, very enlightening. And it was so great to see that. I mean, I'm not completely sure how old he is. I think he's... I actually looked when you mentioned him.
1960, right?
Yeah, 59.
1960. Yeah. So he's it's close to grandpa level. So and he has this childish fun about chess. It's so great when he sees a great line that he's like, I have a great line. I need to show you. And it was fantastic. So
wow, sounds like really quite an experience.
It was really great. Yeah, it was really great. And also it's really fun because he has problems with the technical side of things. Yeah. Right. So I always have the mouse and I have to put in all the moves that he's giving. It was so much fun. It was like, I show you a line, and then he was firing out the moves, and I had to enter them, and it was great fun. The audience always loves when he is on. Yeah, it's really, really great. Yeah, okay. So this is a suggestion. Maybe this can happen. It would be pretty much, I think, a highlight to come.
Yeah, that's a great one. As I've mentioned before, I love the Soviet era legends. Because they've got the combination of chess knowledge and stories, and obviously someone like Yusupov has had so many roles in the chess world. That would be amazing.
Yeah, it would be good fun. Yeah, I would really like to listen to that. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, well, Christof, congratulations, by the way. I mean, I know that you've been working super hard, so congratulations on what seems to me like a successful launch.
Yeah, we're happy with the start. It's only out for a couple of days. Um, yeah, we'll see what happens. Yeah, this will be yeah, those courses, they really have a long life cycle. It will be on for a couple of years, and it will also be probably changed over the years. Yeah,
Yeah.
if Magnus plays something else, maybe we'll change some lines, yeah, and get more variety in there. This is of course also a beauty of online content, that it's much easier, of course, to change than a print book. Once it's
Yeah,
out, it's out.
yeah. It's not dying the day it's born the way an opening
Yeah,
book sometimes can be.
it's a living product, so to say, and it can grow over time and can get can get better over time, even if you're even if you progress as a writer and kind of have a different perspective on things. I nowadays the initial courses that were written for Chessable in 2016, if I would write them today, they would be much different.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They would be much different. I just know a little things a little bit better, and you learn with every little thing. This is also very important. Yeah, you should be trying to draw conclusions from what you do. And for example, the D4 book that I wrote, yeah, it had chapters that now, as I recognize them, are a little bit too long, and therefore the videos are really long. And this is what we have, for example, avoided in the Magnus book. Every chapter should have a video that is not longer than roughly an hour.
Yeah.
Or an hour 10 or something, which is already quite long. But if you look at the chapters back then for the D4 book, there is one video that is 3 hours.
Wow. Yeah.
And this is just, I mean, of course, probably nobody will listen to the 3 hours in a row. Maybe somebody will do, but you will probably cut it for yourself in some digestible portions. And now I know it's better to have them a little bit shorter. And this is every single experience, I think, helps to make a better product. This is what you always should do: strive to get better at what you do.
Yeah. Way. Well, you were even when we spoke 3 years ago, you were already good. So to get better is quite an achievement. So people know. I'll link to your Twitter account, Christof. Of course, you're active on Chessable and reachable there. Is there anywhere else?
Yeah, if somebody wants to reach out, it's easiest to use my webpage. There is a contact sheet.
Okay.
For me, this is probably easiest. I don't really use Twitter. I have an account, but I don't look at this all that much. I'm a bit of a social media skeptic.
Okay, good for you. Yeah.
And I mean, I'm always for the D4 book. I actually locked myself out of Facebook for 3 months because I felt this could be good, yeah, to save a little bit of time. And after the release, I went on there again, and again I'm thinking, why am I not deleting the whole thing?
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like. Yeah, it's really something that that people should think of. The time they spend on social media can be terrible, a terrible waste of time. And I don't think in many cases it has really, really negative consequences. I think what is pretty harmless is, for example, what I just listened to like 2 hours ago. I listened to a somewhat older interview that you did with do I get the name right? Tarjei Svensson, the journalist.
Yeah, Norwegian, journalist.
And it was around the time of the World Championship match 2018 when you recommended that during the games one should watch Twitter for remarks coming by other players or things like that. I mean, this is obviously fun. Yeah. It's all right. But I'm very, very skeptical about this whole let's say influencer business, people promoting stuff on Instagram with their photoshopped pictures and so on. This is not healthy. This is not healthy at all.
Yeah, I agree. Twitter has a special place in my heart, but definitely be mindful of how you're using social media.
There are some things that are really, really not good and absolutely not helpful in any way. It's just not helping anybody besides the people who earn chunks of money for
exactly.
being those whatever influencers or however you want to call them. All right.
Okay, so don't tweet at Christof, but I'll link to his webpage and you can email him there. And of course, check him out on Chessable.
I would probably get it at some time, but
right, months later. Yeah.
Short
okay. Well, Christof, it's always a pleasure talking to you. I'm glad to see you doing so well. And yeah, keep up the great work.
Yeah, you as well. I'm happy to listen to the new book podcast. I was actually, when I was starting the one that I started 2 hours ago, the old one with Tyre Swenson, I was seeing on my mobile a new podcast on Friday, and I was like, what is he doing Friday? And again, it was exactly the one about the Tal book, which is
Yeah, I'm excited for this project. So yeah, and so many books. I mean, it could keep me busy for a while. So
you go through all the history. I
mean, I don't want it to be just historical. I just want anything that's not an opening book or a tactics book. I feel like we can talk about. So
I think the opening book would be pretty dry. I
don't
find anything that is really of a historical importance. The Tal book is a really good one to start with. It's a fantastic book.
Yeah, it's amazing. He was one of a kind. Okay, well, Christof, good luck, and thanks again for an enlightening and entertaining conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Maybe again in 3 years.
That would be awesome, whenever you want. Special thanks, as always, to my producer, Matthew Passy. I'd also like to thank everyone who helps spread the word about Perpetual Chess. The ways to do so include writing a positive review on Apple Podcasts or another podcast platform, telling a friend, spreading the word on social media. All of that stuff helps. But most of all, I want to thank the people who support the show financially. Without you guys, Perpetual Chess would not be possible. So I would like to give thanks to the following people and entities: my PayPal and Patreon Perpetual Chess partners. Here we go. They are extra special thanks to Chessable.com and Quality Chess Books and the Capital City Chess Club, Apprentice Twitch channel, Andrew Bach, Austin Clough, Benjamin Porto, Kathy Cow, Chad Oliver, Dan O'Hanlon, Danny Davidson, David Schreiber, IM Dimitri Schneider, Faraz Sawaf, Gary Foreman, Greg Nattel, Greg Shahade, Guven Manet, Jens Green, John Jernigan, John Cromarty, Kelly Palmer, Lone Pine Chess, Lorraine DeRay, the law offices of Stuart Katz, Michael Cann, my main man Moonmaster 9000, Seattle Chess Club, Thomas Stonix, Thomas Tachenko, Todd Bryan, Todd Kennedy, and I'd also like to thank Aaron Waffler, Ace Vallega, Adam Ralph of ChessEngland.com, Adrian Gutierrez, Alex Pejas, FM Andre Terakov, Andrew Perry, Bill Moran, Brad and Andy Rosen, Brett Howard Lynn, Brian Mullis, Chad Hilton, Chris Balcom, Chris Flanagan, Chris Wainscott, Christopher Baumgartner, Christopher Chabris, Christopher Wood. I am Christof Sielecki, aka Chess Explained, Coach J's Chess Academy, Courtney Fry, David Koford, Daniel Gell, Daniel Ginsberg, Daniel Lucas of US Chess, Daniel Naylor, Dave Saylor, David Cramley, CEO of Chessable.com, Dalen Shelton, Dwayne Edmonds, Ethan Smith, Donnie Ariel, who may be an IM elect or maybe just has the titles, and I'm not sure if that makes him an IM elect, but thank you, Donnie, anyway. Fox Valley Chess Club, Frank Tortoris, Gary Andrews, Gary Lewis, Geert Vanderveld, Gerard Barta, Giovanni Russo, Han Schut, Harish Srinivasan, James Banastia, Jason Onfang, Jason Woolham, Jeff Anderson, Jeffrey Martello, JJ Stranad, John Fernandez, John Fontaine, John Hartman, John Zlosnik, Justin Gardner, Jen Shahade, Joel Rocky, John Thompson, GM Josh Friedel, IM Kare Christensen, WGM Katerina Nemtsova, Kelly Palmer, IM Kostya Kovutsky, Krishna Gopala Krishnan, Larry Wrightforth, Laura Belyavsky, Lucio Casada Silva, Martin Knudsen, Matthew Passy, Matthew Tedesco of SeattleChessMeetup.org, the Mechanics Institute Chess Club of San Francisco, Michael Allard, Miguel Aristide, Mr. Mike Shahade, Nate Salon, Neil Bruce, Olaf Mueller-Michaels, GM Pascal Charbonneau, Pasi Passanen, Paul Bain, Paul Clarkson, Paul Swanee, Paulo Santana, Peter Lux, Peter Merrifield, Randy Temple, Ricky Grijalva, Roy Yearwood, Ryan Berg, Scott Doherty, Scott McKinnon, WGM Tatyev Abrahamian, Tim Brennan of TacticsTime.com, Tim Seymour, Timothy Ha, Tomas Kolmanich, Tony Rotella, Tyron Price, Victor Vrancouz, William H. Brock, William Peterson, FM Zhao Cheng, and Zhivko Stoyanov. Thanks a lot, everyone. I will catch you all next week.